Already, yes.
Centralized.
So good evening, everyone. I'll call the regular council meeting of November 14th to order at 5 p.m. And I'll say, I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but happy Diwali to members of our community. And we have the agenda in front of us. Are there any additions or deletions?
I do have an addition, please, your worship, under closed session. Section 24, advice from officials, vendor management. Please, thank you.
Any other changes? If not, would someone please move the acceptance of the agenda as amended? Thank you, Councillor for Deputy Mayor Shannon. So moves. All those in favor? It is carried. Thank you. Okay, we have the minutes of the October 23rd regular council meeting in front of us. Any edits to those minutes? Okay, if someone can move the acceptance of those minutes. Councillor Ford so moves. All those in favor? It is carried. Then we have the minutes of the organizational meeting also held on October 23rd. Any edits to those? Moving their acceptance. Councillor Carr so moves. All those in favor? It is carried. Next up, we have public hearings, and we don't have any, but next we have presentations, and we have stars with us today. So if you'd like to come forward and press the mic button so it stays red and you're live.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to bring you your annual update. So I'm Glenna Farden, the Senior Municipal Relations Liaison for STARS. And I have the pleasure and have had the pleasure for 17 years now working with rural and urban councils across the entire province of Alberta and northeastern BC. So we'll get started. That's all right. Okay, so first and foremost, I'd like on the very first page there, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that after almost 38 years, on December 1st, we will be celebrating 38 years of serving Albertans. And so we're going through a bit of a rebrand now, so you'll notice a little bit different logo there, as well as we have a new focus. You know, our main focus and vision has always been about saving lives, but with latest in technology that's available now, as well as we have brand new fleet, lots of learnings from COVID, as well as during the wildfires. So bringing everything together and now being the dedicated critical care provider for Alberta. So we want to provide and utilize all these tools to provide critical care anywhere. Will this work? No. The mouse button. Just right. But no. Are you able to advance for me? What am I doing wrong? Sure, I'll sleep. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So, of course, we are fueled by generosity, and this includes the government of Alberta as well. Previously, we had a 10-year affiliation agreement in place with Alberta Health Services for 20% government funding, which expired in 2020, and we have been year to year since then. They've given us an exemption for this year that they are looking at moving to 50% government funding. I'm pleased to report that last year, at the end of the year, we did receive a top-up to 50% of operational costs. So what that means is basically $10 million per base, 3 bases in Alberta, half of that for operational costs is $15 million. So we received a top up to that. This does not include the Emergency Link Center located in Calgary, which is our dispatch center for all our bases. It does not include education, and it does not include administration costs. So strictly operationally related costs only. Currently, we are in very high-level discussions with their senior leadership in hopes of securing another 10-year long-term affiliation agreement in Alberta at the 50% funding. So more to come at a future update as to what that decision will be towards the end of the year. In the meantime, if they will sign a 10-year affiliation agreement in place for 50% government funding, that will align Alberta with what we're already receiving in Saskatchewan and an even higher rate in Manitoba. So this is where we're at now with the municipal support across the province of Alberta and into northeastern BC. So it's a very busy map, but I wanted to let you know that since I last reported to you last year, we've already added 5 more rural municipalities as well as 6 more urban municipalities across the province. So we have 4 asks pending that you can see there. The ones that are shown in white are currently not a part of the municipal initiative program that has been running since the beginning of STARS. So in the red boxes, there are 9 municipal leaders now. Since last year, we had welcomed Sturgeon County as a municipal leader, that they are now have been joined in a significant fixed dollar value rate that they include in their emergency protective services budgets each year, recognizing STARS as an additional option of the emergency protective services they provide for their residents. As well, in the yellow boxes, now those are regional partnerships that we're also building, meaning that there's towns and villages that lie within the county's boundaries, and they are also supporters of STARS. Most of these are at a $2 per capita rate. There's 17 of them that are not in yellow boxes, but are providing a minimum $2 per capita rate each year. And then of that 90% across the province, there's 50% of them are at a much higher rate than that as well. So ranging as high as $90 per capita. The ones in the municipal leaders in the red boxes, now they are at the fixed rates of support. So all in total encompassed together as a collective unit of municipalities across the province, we're currently generating together approximately just over $2 million per year. So that is a portion of the $18 million that still remains that must be fundraised each year, aside from the $15 million that we receive from the government. So it is very much a united effort that everyone is working together to ensure that we all have access to a robust health and safety network. This is for the town of Peace River itself alone, as far as missions that have been flown by STARS. So you can see that, you know, there's been a significant increase in last year, this year. A lot is probably still to do with the wildfire situation as well. Right now, in the last 6 months, we've seen a significant increase from a lot of the rural community hospitals asking for help with respiratory distress and being able to provide procedural guidance for like intubation and things like that as well. So all in all, right now you stand at 14 missions so far this year up to October 31st, specifically for town of Peace River and your interfacility transfers. Now, last year, I told you about this. This was a brand new pilot project, the postal code. It's been 10 years in the making, in the fact of being able to utilize patient postal code. No other patient information other than the postal code where they resided at the time they were flown by STARS. We've been able to go back as far as 2010. So since the information I presented to you last year, there's been for 2023 alone, there's been 4 more area residents that have been flown by STARS. But now on the right-hand side, more interestingly enough, is in that total of 100 total area residents, they have been flown from all 3 STARS bases in Alberta. 67 were Peace River regional residents, or Peace River residents, that possessed a Peace River postal code. 39 were actually picked up in Peace River, but 61 of these residents were flown from 22 other municipalities across the province. This is a testament to our partnership and the value of our partnership for your residents. They can have access to STARS from all 6 bases across Western Canada. Emergency Link Center is located in Calgary. They receive over 36,000 emergency requests each year, that's 100 per day. We also have integrated dispatch in the fact for the southernmost regions where Halo is also a resource, as well as Hero up in the Wood Buffalo area. They are dispatched through the STARS Emergency Link Center. And we also have the Vigilant program, which monitors more than 4,000 registered industry sites each year. So this is of significant value, especially in the more remote northern regions where we live up here, where there's significant amount of industry activity, and the fact that they have access to every single available resource throughout the province. So even if there is an incident up north here, if we know that there is an industry paramedic 1 kilometer down the road, we can contact that company and have them come while other local resources are being made available. So this is significant value, especially to the northern region. We also have critical care. I've told you about our focus of trying to provide critical care anywhere. This means physically and virtually, whether or not the helicopter arrives or the helicopter may be out on another call. It does not mean that we're leaving your communities defenseless. Now with the latest in technology and being designated the critical care provider for Alberta, our STARS transport physicians are in the Emergency Link Center. They can provide medical and procedural guidance on every critical call, no matter what the mode of transport is for that patient. And so with that now, we're trialing another system where we can actually FaceTime with your local physicians at your local hospital, provide that procedural guidance, provide medical guidance, maybe even virtually, like FaceTiming. So this is a significant advancement in where critical care will be going and how we can still help other communities, physically or virtually. And in addition now, we can also save time on both ends. Even if the helicopter is en route, our STARS transport physicians can make all the logistical arrangements with the receiving doctors at the receiving hospitals. So now they are able to save time on both ends because they will be making the arrangements to schedule the neurosurgeons, schedule the cardiac cath lab while we're en route. So again, saving time saves lives. It was a generational investment in order to have a new fleet. In October of last year, we received the 10th and final H145 helicopter. So now all bases are fully H145 operational. We've also had the incrementally was able to sell off the previous BK-117 fleet. And so we've attributed those funds to the more than $150 million capital campaign. So I'm very pleased to report to you as a council that all 10 helicopters are also paid for and the campaign is completed. As well, last year, we also did celebrate more than 20 years of having night vision goggle capability. Literally, tens of thousands of patients' lives have been saved because we had that capability for more than 20 years now. 50% of our call volume is at night. So of course, last year I brought you an overview of some of the very highly specialized medical equipment in the back of the helicopter and the new equipment, as well as now, just to have a little more in-depth look at the training. You know, it's very important that we also maintain the very highest level of critical care expertise in our crew. So it is mandatory for each crew member, medical crew member, that they must have minimum 150 up to 200 hours per year of mandatory online textbook and hands-on simulation with the high fidelity mannequins. We have all sizes of mannequins as well, from neonatal, pediatric, adult, even a pregnancy mannequin now. We're very fortunate that we have a lot of industry supporters who believe in the safety and education component and been able to help us provide these mannequins. You know, some of these mannequins are upwards of $300,000 per mannequin, and we have 6 spaces. So it really does require a lot of donors that are, you know, believe in the training and the medical aspect of keeping, you know, very high level skills up. We also have clinical educators at each one of our bases, so that they will replicate very complex and distinct cases that we may see, that maybe, you know, 2 crew members, medical crew members, no one else may ever see that in 10 years or in a lifetime. So they'll recreate these very distinct complex cases and then put all of our crew members through the same training, so that everyone's been exposed to having that particular experience and expertise. We also do simulation in the field. And so this is to be ensured that our crews are ready for the unthinkable, inclement weather, you know, being able to maintain and deal with that type of thing, patient vulnerability, and high consequence situations. So, for example, just recently, and this was out of our Grand Prairie base, that we had to go for a patient that was at a riverbank. But there was only one location where the helicopter could actually land on the riverbank, which we did, but the patient was on the opposite side. And so they had to actually load up their packs on their back, and the crew members forged the river in order to get to the other side to reach the patient. And it took all crew members in order to bring the patient back to the helicopter. So these are just some of the situation. They don't know what they're going to be dealing with. But when you think that you have to be ready and prepared for the unthinkable. We also train with our chain of survival partners, you know, landing zone training. We do work with a lot of the rural and local fire departments. We were very pleased to have the opportunity to partner with your fire department here last year at a hockey game. It was really wonderful, and we had a lot of fun doing that and partnering. It's really important to have those opportunities to train together, and especially for landing zone training. A lot of the fire departments will have acquire a lot of new members that have not had that experience or expertise. So we also provide this online. They can do online training sessions with landing zone video. So that's all through the Vigilant program that's on our website. We also do mock training scenarios. Sometimes we've had the opportunity to bring in, as a region, and may bring in, you know, as many as 8 different fire departments together on a safety training type of day, and do a lot of mock scenarios as well. So those are opportunities that we're really looking at and hopeful to continue. And of course, it also helps everyone involved in the chain of survival to prepare for such things as multi-casualty incidents. Last year, I told you about the International Air Medical Transport Conference. This is an international simulation competition, a very rigorous competition where they create the most inconceivable situations. Our crews have to triage multiple patients, and they are graded on their decision-making, timing, and the patient outcomes, utilizing many of these high-fidelity mannequins. This year in particular, last year I reported to you that our crew actually won first place internationally. That marked the 7th time in 20 years that we participated that we have taken first place. This year's was a complex case in the situation that there was a pediatric patient with a severe head injury, a pregnant mother also in cardiac arrest, and the boyfriend also having acute chest pain. And during the whole scenario of managing these 3 different patients, the lights went out and there was no lights for about 3 hours that they had to continue maintaining their critical care on the mannequins in the dark. Quite amazing. In the end, this is only just at the very end of October, so it's very recent information. So this year we were the runner-up, so we took 2nd place in that particular scenario, but still 21 years now, always being top 3 in the world. We're very proud of that. So in closing, I would like to say thank you, Town of Peace River. We thank you for your leadership, your dedication, and your support of STARS. And previously, I wanted to give you some background information. Back in 2013, in that your council was on board, joining more than 90% of all of Alberta at a $2 per capita rate. And then with a subsequent council that was changed to $1 per capita. Last year, your support was for $5,000, which we greatly appreciate, but we really want to welcome you and your council back with more than 90% of all of Alberta. So we're kindly asking during your budget deliberations, if you would consider moving to the $2 per capita rate that joins more than 90% of Alberta. All in all, you know, a life is saved every day, but it's partnership that makes that possible. We value the partnership that we share with you and your residents. And we also want to continue to work together to enhance critical care for our future generations. In 2025, STARS is going to celebrate 40 years, 40 of serving Albertans. But it's all because of people like you. So thank you very much for your continued support.
Thank you. That's a lot of service over a lot of years.
It is.
Yeah. Councilors, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. Just curious about the data that you were talking about when it comes to tracking via postal code.
Yes.
So, like, we have super boxes in town throughout town, so those postal codes are tied to residents here in town. But how do you differentiate the postal codes that are at our post office, where the majority of those people are either businesses or residents that pick up their mail that live in one of our surrounding communities?
Right.
The DMVs.
And we're not able to. We were only able to access, getting postal codes in a kind of a block form from Canada Post. So it does include any rural residents in the area that may, live just outside of Peace River, but have a Peace River postal code. But this is as close as we could get. It's, as I said, it's been 10 years in the making. We're still continuing to perfect it. Not able to determine whether it's a town resident or it's a rural resident that lives just outside of your boundaries, but giving you a good example of what's happening in your area. And more importantly, though, the whole focus of was to show that your residents, accidents and illness do not happen just because we're close to home. And so that on the right-hand side, the red dots really showed you across the entire province where all of these residents had traveled and still were flown by STARS. So that's more the important aspect, is that we want to show that partnership is ensuring that we all have access to a robust health and safety network, no matter where we happen to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
So am I correct in saying that you have $18 million, 18 million that you have to fundraise? So how would you do that other than your calendars? Are there any other fundraising activities you do?
There's calendars, there's long-term events like community events. After COVID, we did lose some of our really significant events, because after 2 and 3 years, it's very hard to kind of get things going again. So we've start to, work with communities again now that, we're able to. And develop some new events as well. So events is a big part of it. Community fundraisers, service clubs that, want to support annually just by providing a certain sum each year. There's lots of different areas aside from just the calendar campaign. That's a very small piece, actually. And then, as I said, of that 18 million, just over $2 million is this collective support from municipalities each year. That also, it just helps to offset the cost. When we were looking at, was it 14 missions so far this year in your area? Just, with your hospital here and one scene hall, because of course you have other resources that are co-located right here. Of course, that makes sense that, most of the time it'll be your local resources. Sometimes we're just an additional option, additional tool in the toolkit, if you will, right? But that represents well over $100,000 just in mission-related costs only, between fuel and medical equipment and supplies and those types of things. Thank you.
Counselors, any other questions? So I've just got one. So your helicopters, they operate by radio contact. Is there any place in Alberta that if they landed, they wouldn't have radio contact? Like cell phones don't work all over the place, but the radio is different, right?
Right, the radio, but we also have satellite connectivity, we have Bluetooth, we have integrated Wi-Fi, all the new technology is in this new helicopter, right? And we're always in communication with mostly whatever local resource would be available, as far as fire departments or RCMP or local search and rescue. A lot of these different components that we, also work with, right? Just to give you a bit of an idea, download this was, after 37.5 years, STARS Grand Prairie flew STARS record mission in 37.5 years. And this was very far northern regions, past Fort Nelson. We were the only resource that was available to even reach this patient, and this patient needed the blood on board, needed all of the medical equipment, everything that we could provide. So through the Emergency Link Center in Calgary, they were able to coordinate all the different areas that we needed to go in order to reach and be able to refuel, and then still get that patient back once we reach the patient, get back and get that patient to tertiary care. So, and it's a good news story because he actually came to the Grand Prairie base and has been reunited with his crew. So this is just an example of, when people ask, well, how far can, where's the circle, or how far can you fly? Pilots like to say, where do you need us to go? And this is proof.
Thank you. For counselors, any last minute questions? Well, thank you for your presentation, Glenda, and we'll obviously be considering it during budget deliberations.
Yes,
So good luck with your travels tonight as well.
thank you very much. I brought you a brand new calendar
Oh, lovely. Thank
and a
you.
couple of the newsletters, and of course, Allied Impact Report. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you.
If you have any other questions, don't hesitate. Barb knows how to get a hold of me.
Okay,
Thank you so much for your time.
okay. Our next item is bylaws, and we have none to consider. Unfinished business, none to consider. So new business, we're on to the 2024 draft operating budget with Mr. Mugford, who has a presentation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council. Tonight I'll be presenting the draft 2024 operating budget for tax supported operations. I'll begin with a quick recap of the fund reporting structure, walk through the process used to compile and approve the budget, go over key assumptions, administration included, and provide additional information about how to interpret and understand the budget info provided, and then complete a departmental and object category level review. There'll be an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation, but I'll also pause after the assumptions and understand the budget section and after each departmental section, because I found that previously that kind of helps the flow a bit. So to recap, the town's operating budget is divided into tax supported and utility supported functions. This presentation will only address the tax supported functions, so it excludes water, wastewater, storm sewer, and solid waste collection. Also, it excludes family resource network, parent education, and home visitation budgets, as these sub-departments or programs that are fully funded by third parties, and programming is delivered by the town. So our process is it's decentralized. So we receive input from all the department heads. Corporate services then provides a review, and we have a detailed discussion with directors. CAO is involved in that review, and we calculate what the municipal requisition would need to be. Previously, we've approved an interim budget before the end of the year, which is required by the MJ. But if we're successful in getting this approved before the end of the year, then we will need to do so. That we then bring it before council. Council has an opportunity to review the information, have discussion, receive input from the public, and then it's brought back for final approval. Also, as we've been preparing the budget for 2024, we've been inputting information for 2025 through 2027's operating plan. So a few of the assumptions, which I'll go through, that differ a little bit from last year. So we looked at prior year actual costs. We looked at 3-year trends. Some of the items are known figures or firm estimates. As part of our 2024 budget, really since the beginning of COVID, we've seen a significant amount of volatility in some areas, which has caused a fair bit of pressure on our budget. So the budget process, we've included inflationary increases that we anticipate, but we didn't do any across the board inflation. It wasn't like a set percentage that we moved everything up by. We really tried to use judgment in as many areas as possible to be as accurate as possible. Areas of note where there's been increases with administration have little control include the cost of utilities and the cost of policing. So both of those we have very, very little control or influence on, and it's a cost that gets passed on to the taxpayer. Annual inflation for 2023 has not been finalized, but based on the data that I've reviewed, it appears to be running around 4% for the year. So as I mentioned, as a result of this, we really dug into the details line by line in the budget to reduce any discretionary spending items and remove items that were previously budgeted on a contingent basis. Included in our budget is a 3% targeted increase to the municipal requisition. We also assume in our budget that service levels will be maintained at current levels, except for items which I'm specifically noting in the following slides. Primarily going to be speaking to areas where there's variances in the year over year and what the main drivers of those variances are. So a few key assumptions that the budget is built upon, in with some salary and benefits discussions. So as of today, we still have not resolved the collective agreement that expired in 2022. Negotiations for that are ongoing, but that does create some potential volatility or variance within our salary numbers impacting our unionized employees. We did not include a vacancy rate in the budget. So by not including vacancy rate, that does take a bit of the risk out of the budget. In general, we have turnover in our positions, and so there are periods of time when we have vacancies. In our budget, there's a couple of positions that we don't anticipate will be filling until later into the year. And so we did adjust for those anticipated vacancies, but we didn't put in any across the board reduction. Also, we did include in our budgets the anticipated increases for CPP, EI, and other benefits. That's all built into this budget. The budget also includes changes to our org structure. So we made some new positions and modified some positions that are being proposed. So we've allocated budget to upgrade one of our CPO positions to a director level. So that director will oversee the CPO program, they'll be the RCP, they'll oversee that relationship with the RCP. They also oversee fire and emergency response. The budget also includes funds for an economic development coordinator level position and continues funding for the Economic Development Committee, grants to groups and grants to businesses. There's also some minor changes within community services that are factored into this budget. So that's a proposal to upgrade one of the positions to a manager role and to create an additional position within that department. This slide just speaks to a bit of information, understanding what you're about to see, understanding the budget. So expenses are shown as debits or positive figures, and revenues are shown as credits or negatives. So the budget includes some non-GAAP items. So GAAP is just generally accepted accounting principles. So our budget still includes items that you would not see as expenses as part of our audited financial statements. The significant one this year is the principal repayment of long-term debt. So again, that's not an expense per se, but it is a cash requirement that the town needs to pay off those long-term debts. One key difference in the budget presentation from this year compared to last year is 2023. We basically allocated we budgeted an expense for contribution to capital. In 2024, we included our amortization expense. So the amortization expense is the cost of long-term assets spread over the useful life of that asset. So if you had a $1 million vehicle that its useful life is 10 years, rather than expensing that $1 million vehicle at the time you purchase it, you would allocate $100,000 per year over 10 years to spread that cost over when you receive the economic benefit of that asset. That doesn't mean that after 10 years it's worth nothing. It doesn't relate to the market value of the asset. It's basically the accounting system to expense that asset over time.
Can I interrupt you?
Certainly.
So just help me understand that if you could. Okay, so you buy this $1 million vehicle and you go to the dealer and you say, I'm buying this $1 million vehicle. So don't you have to have cash at that point to buy it? Or you're saying, no, you don't really, we'll amortize it over 10 years or whatever.
So if you're purchasing it in cash, you would spend the cash at that time, but you wouldn't record the expense at that time. You'd set up an asset on your books, and amortization expense would be recognized over the period that matches with that asset. So a vehicle, it could be 10-year useful life, a building, it could be a 50-year useful life. It's going to vary depending on the average expected life of that asset. The method that you choose to finance that asset could vary. You could choose to purchase it in cash, You could choose to get a loan for it or a long-term capital lease. There's different options available for the actual purchasing, but that is separate from how it gets expensed.
So, of the two elements that you mentioned there then, you're paying it as an expense and you're also paying for future something or other through the amortization?
So when you first purchase the asset,
Mhm.
you don't expense the whole cost of it. Right? There might be a cash outlay. If you're spending cash on, it, but you don't record the expense in your statements at that time. And that's why the amortization number that you're gonna see in our budget. Over time, if we didn't purchase any new assets, that number would slowly decrease over time. So as we go out, and we purchase new capital assets, they are then getting expensed as well over their lifetime. So, you know, a short-term example would be something like a computer where the useful life might only be 3 years. You buy the computer, you expense a third of it each year over those 3 years. That's, oh, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Good and then CAO.
Is that because to an extent, I'm gonna use two examples. If we bought a diamond instead of a car. You buy the diamond for $1 million. It has a value which could increase. You're basically moving, am I correct, between the asset value and the expense are to some degree related to each other. In other words, you bought the $1 million truck, you have an asset, it has a value, it's recorded there, so it's, the expense is there, yeah, you paid the $1 million for the truck, but you also got an asset worth $1 million on that day. Amortization takes into account either depreciation or increase in value, but mostly depreciation because of the assets we buy. Am I correct on that?
So, Jim, and again, I don't want to get
And
too far into the realm of
here's the value, the cash value that we're not, it's not an equal track, but it is kind of a relationship between the two. You have a value. You didn't take the $1 million to throw it away. It's not a total, it's not an expense without a benefit.
So, correct, it's okay, the benefit is spread over the period.
Right.
That you expect to derive it.
To get the value or usefulness.
Right. So, and in terms of, you know, within the municipal space, you're talking about depreciating assets. So if you just had a piece of land, as an example, there wouldn't be amortization expense associated with that raw land. It would just be held on your books at its asset value. And when I say held on your books, that $1 million vehicle, year one, it would show as a net value of $1 million. Over each year, it would decrease. So at year 5, you'd say, okay, its net book value is $500,000. By year 10, its net book value is 0. Again, that doesn't mean the asset's worth nothing.
Right.
It just means that it's fully amortized or fully depreciated. Your comments here, Miller?
Yes.
I was just gonna try to put some clarity around amortization, is that if we collectively in this room bought something for $1,000, that would last 10 years, like you said. But we wouldn't want to pay the full 1,000 ourselves if we moved away, we all left. And it's still good for next year's 9 years. We want the people that are gonna use it for the next 9 years pay their share of the cost. So that's why it's amortized over the life of the asset. So the users of that asset pay the cost of that asset. Because otherwise you could pay everything up front, and then for the next 20 years, the residents never have to pay for something, but they continue to use it. So you're always matching.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I can draw a picture. We will have a conversation, a future discussion about amortization to make it clear, but it is matching how much of that asset you're using to conduct business this year.
Very good.
Yeah, and again, it's new in the budget this year, and so it's important that we take the time that council understands when they see that figure. It means something. Now, one thing that I wanted to also highlight is that capital revenue from third parties so the provincial, federal funding that we receive to replace our capital assets. We don't have that revenue in this budget. That'll be revenue that you'll see when we bring our capital budget before council. We show how we're going to fund the assets with the purchases. You'll see then the breakdown of, is it coming from reserves? Is it coming from provincial, federal, other grants?
Did you want questions on any of the assumptions yet, or you want to wait until parts?
Yeah,
Either way, it's up to you, but.
it was just there. So
Okay,
pause briefly here and see if there's any questions on this the previous 2 or 3 slides, some key assumptions and understanding the budget.
so I'd just like council to think about the key assumptions. In particular, upgrading one CPO position to director level, addition of an economic development officer position, and restructuring of community services as indicated here and later in the report. So you should be asking questions. If you're saying, well, no, I totally disagree with adding any of those, say so at some point. Don't wait until the last day when we're voting on whether we accept the budget or not.
Well, some of these we've already discussed and kind of de facto agreed on in a way.
The one we have,
I'm sure at least 2 of them we have.
we agreed on one CPO
CPO.
position and the economic development.
I'm,
We haven't
did we
agreed
have
on
an
the
official vote on that? I thought we had a discussion about it though, yes.
We had a discussion, we
Yeah,
had an
okay.
agreement on the CPO director level. We have not had any kind of a real agreement on the economic development officer, so I'm just bringing this up, so realize that that has a budget implication that went into that 3% factor that all this is happening to, and restructuring community services as well has some implication in that 3%. So don't wait until the end of the budget and say, well, 3% is too much. If you're agreeing with these, there's an implication on one sense, unless you can find something else.
Unless you
Delete.
find somebody else, but
Mhm. So anyways, any questions on those right now? Yes, Councillor Carr.
I had one question. The 3% you referred to, that is specific to operating? That is not, like, will you be coming back with an additional one for capital budget? Or is the 3% expected for everything?
So our budget is built on, and you'll see this when we get to the summary of our amortization, or the total organization on the whole. That is funding our amortization expense. Previously, last year, you see it within the operating budget as a contribution to capital. And again, I'll show you once we get to the reconciliation, but that this is, the intention behind this is to be able to use basically it's not a surplus per se. You'll see it as a deficit this year, but this will be used to fund those capital items this year.
So the 3% is what you're saying?
Correct.
Long story short, 3%. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rutherford. On this we go.
So the first departmental view, I'll just highlight that we were presenting the budget this evening by department and object category. If you recall, last year, we initially presented at this level, and I provided a verbal high-level summary of all of the significant differences year over year. And then when we brought it back for approval, that's when we provided the budget line detail. So that's kind of one layer further down. So this is presenting by object category. If you go down to object, just as an example, I'll use salaries and benefits. So number 21 on here. So that is further broken out in our budget system down to, salaries, overtime, standby pay, etc. So these are object groupings, but I think it helps council make be able to, I understand the differences a little bit more easily than getting into the weeds right off the top. So beginning with government corporate services, so this grouping includes revenues and expenses for mayor and council costs, general government, IT, communications, finance, employee services, so that includes our health and safety and human resources. It's where the bulk of the town's revenue is allocated through our general taxation collection. So the significant changes, again, we're targeting a 3% increase to our municipal requisition for taxes. This grouping also includes some revenue items which have offsetting expenses, so where we're collecting on behalf of another entity, we record the revenue and the expense. The budget includes some modest increases in salary expense. I'll also highlight that within the grants and other transfers line item, the cost of the community organization property tax exemption program is included there, and that has gone up. So it was previously 190,000 in 2023. It's now up to 205,000 is what we're anticipating for 2024. And those applications will be brought back before council before the end of this year. Some other items that I wanted to highlight is the grants to groups budget remains at 55 grand. Included in this budget, we have website development costs. So that was initially budgeted in 2023. It's looking like we won't quite have that underway or at the door before the end of the year. So we moved that cost forward. It's not that we're not doubling up on that, we're just rebudgeting it. We also include in this budget increase to contracted services. So that's reflecting some additional costs relating to IT managed service and inclusion of some communication support. We've also got in this budget inclusion of some one-time support for our human resources to provide that role some support in addressing some of our policies that need to be updated and things of that nature. Any questions within corporate services and general government?
So it's nice to see debt and capital charge went down for whatever reasons there. Probably went up someplace else.
Yeah, so you'll see that, thank you for bringing that up, Madam Mayor. That line item 29, debt and capital charges, that is the one you're going to see swing around significantly as we go through the presentation, because that's where the amortization expense lives. So previously in short, general government and corporate services doesn't have many assets that are being amortized. Whereas when we get to public works and fire and recreation community services, that's when you'll see those numbers swing significantly between these two budgets. And again, by 2025's budget, you'll have clean comparables again. So it'll make a bit more sense. Moving on to protective services. So protective services is comprised of RCMP, so the costs associated with our RCMP staff and our contract with the RCMP. Also by law enforcement, community police officer, and all the fire protection operations and emergency management as well. So the significant changes in protective services, and on the revenue side, there's a modest increase to our protective services revenue as we review our fee structure, and there's been a focus this year especially, and will continue in the next year, that we're capturing all of the revenue associated with fire calls as appropriate. We also reduced our budgeted permits and license revenue. And that's really just in line with where the trend has been, that there hasn't been as much ticketing RCMP, with our CPO position having been maintained in the past. And it's still like our bylaw officer hasn't received his designation yet. We're expecting it sometime this month. There's some limits in terms of how much revenue you can generate when you're not a full CPO. There's also salary pressure, so you're gonna see that across the board, but it's a little bit more pronounced here, in part because of that change to the director role. So moving from a CPO up to a director, we're anticipating obviously there's gonna be a higher cost for that position. As I mentioned, the RCMP costs, that is, it's one that we don't have much control over. It's something that just gets passed on to our taxpayers. But within the budget, it's about $170,000 difference year over year is what we're anticipating for that. And again, as I mentioned, you'll see within debt and capital charges. So that number of $551,610 for 2024. That number is inclusive of the $235,000 worth of amortization expense. So, year over year, it's actually, if you normalize for that, it's a little bit lower. But that number is now in there, and so that's why you're seeing that. Are there any questions on protective services?
Counselor Scott?
Thanks. So those increased RCMP salaries, we haven't had that hit from that yet. That was like a held off thing. Or where is that at? Is it still kind of a time bomb waiting to kind of blow up on us eventually with the RCMP renegotiating their contract and everything? Just want to see where we're at on that.
So the retro pay has been all recorded and accounted for. This budget has a 3.5% provision for, because they're in negotiations again.
Yes.
For this year and next year. So we've built a 3.5% based on a letter from them recommending.
Okay, moving on then to engineering and public works. So this grouping is comprised of engineering, roads, facilities, and operations. The streetlight budget for the town also lives within this department, and vehicle fuel organization. Significant changes this year includes within contracted services, we've increased the snow removal budget. There's a reduction in materials and supplies, which is really just based on our trending actual costs. As I said earlier in the presentation, there's some budgets that were previously built on more of a contingent basis, so that would be there if it's needed. Our approach is more, if it's needed, then come and ask, right? If it's something that's really a priority, then we'll have that discussion at the time. But to remove a bit of that excess from the budget, we've been reducing in certain areas. Now, there's an increase on vehicle costs. That is due to us including the heavy equipment leases. So in the previous year, you would have seen those in the capital budget. We moved them over for transparency purposes to the operating budget where they belong. And also, as I mentioned, we're including the amortization expense, which is what's driving that huge difference in debt and capital charges. Are there any questions for engineering public works?
Could you maybe just give some examples of some contracted services, like is line painting considered a contracted services now, or is that something else?
Subject to check, yeah, no, I believe that is, I have to.
Okay, we're still having problems with my mic. Your worship, some examples of contracted services would include things like hot asphalt repair, stuff that we can't do, but we would go out to an outside firm to do. There's some money sitting in there for that. We've got hydrovac services, I think, included in there for if we have to do any digs or work on the road surfaces. Line painting is actually not in there as a contracted service. It's under materials, I think, currently, because we were historically buying the paint and doing the work ourselves, which is maybe where the comment about straight lines comes in. Other contracted services, we've got hauling for snow clearing is included. There's an allowance for that. There's an allowance for contracted equipment for if we have to do facility snow clearing in parking lots, or if we need to hire a supplemental grader. Crack sealing is in there.
Thank you. Counselor Ford?
When you mentioned hydrovac, do we try and utilize our own equipment before we contract out?
They do, I think, as a general rule, we try and do everything in-house until we can't, pretty much across the board.
So line painting this year, wasn't it contracted out? No? Okay, thank you. Any other questions, counselors? Okay, thank you, Mr. McBurk.
Okay, moving on, I've got transportation as its own sub-function here. So this is revenue and expenses associated with the town's taxi pass program. So just wanted to note that we have increased the revenue and the expense associated with this as the actuals continue to trend higher than budget. That's certainly been true for previous years and this year's as well.
And this is based on, is it still 85%? 80% subsidization? Thank you.
So including the reduction of subsidy. Just make sure it's clear.
Are there any further questions on transportation? Moving on then to public health and social services. So this includes the community development, which I'll discuss a little bit on, and cemetery as well. So overall, fairly consistent from prior years. The reduction, there's a reduction in our grant revenue. So that's being driven by a coding allocation issue. So it's just appearing elsewhere in the budget. As I said earlier in the presentation, each of these programs typically has its own grant funding associated. Most of the material changes here are in budget 515, community development miscellaneous. So when this budget returns to council for final approval, we'll be moving that down into the 600 grouping of our sub-functions, which is planning and development, for the costs there that relate to that, because it's a bit of a mixed bag between development related items and beautification, and those are really two different functions. So within that budget, we have included $60,000 for downtown redevelopment plan. There's $10,000 for retaining wall design, and there's funding from the areas as well. Are there any questions on public health and social services?
So for the health services part of that, is that the Rotary House and Healthcare Committee, or is that something else? 571, I don't know where it goes.
I think it's in the
Yeah.
5-3. Or 571.
Yeah. So does it include the $2,000?
Yes.
Just to get it out.
Yes, it is, your wish.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions there before we move on?
That would be amazing.
Okay, moving on then to planning and development. So we've increased our revenues to reflect actual trends. So there's been just generally a little bit more activity in this area. Also some revenue from the rural renewal stream. We maintained within this grouping the $50,000 business support grants. There's also funding here to support the planning, subdivision and development process. We've got funding here for the land use bylaw, so the draft of it and the legal review of that. document. There's funding here for next generation 911 GIS implementation support, so that'll be included just as a one-time item. And then within the economic development budgets, so we've got the inclusion of one FTE full-time equivalent, inclusion of the part-time rural renewal employee, and continued funding for the Economic Development Committee. So that includes contracted economic development services, feasibility studies and strategic plans, marketing activities, the job fair, the trade show, and just a general fund for them for special projects. Also, there's a small amount of amortization expense that you're now seeing here under debt capital charges. Were there any questions in this area?
Councilors, Councilor Scanlon?
The rural renewal stream program, do we get revenue for hosting, for doing that as well?
There's the revenue from the application process.
Okay, so is that why the revenue side of number 12 is higher? Is that kind of what's sort of driving that?
Yeah.
And does that cover the FTE increase for the coordinator, or are we kind of doing this as more of a service to the region? Not that I mind.
It covers the initial portion of the process. It's the longer term that, with the new economic development, if approved position, there's potential for that position to take on some of the long term.
Okay.
Other questions, councilors? Does this include PRETA and MTAB?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, your worship, sorry.
Okay, no. Any other questions, councilors? PRETA is the MTAB? I think they were looking for details.
I'll bring that next time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bradford.
Okay, moving on. My own clarification. If it doesn't include those, and we wish to include those, then they would go in this section. But they would change these numbers, is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to have clarification on that, so it's not like they can't be put in, it's just this is the time to have, start having the discussion. Correct, thank you,
I'll guess 10 to 15,000, give or take.
thank you.
Sorry. Okay, moving on then, from planning and development to community services. So again, within this budget, this covers recreation, administration programming, the arena, the pool, water parks, sports field parks, the money that and services we provide for the ski hill, the arena, museum, library funding, etc. So it's a pretty large grouping of sub-functions that are rolled up here. But at a high level, we're looking at a modest increase to self-service, which is reflecting the trend and changes in rates. Relatively modest salary changes. So there's a reduction of one partial FTE and inclusion of basically increasing one position a little bit and then a new FTE. Within contracted services, so there's a few line items. One of them that we included was the resurfacing of the rubber at the splash parks is starting to peel up. Materials and supplies, so within this, we've got a larger purchase of shale for the ballparks. But overall, again, if the trend has been lower, then we can reduce it accordingly. Repair and maintenance is higher in part due to some of the repairs of the NAR building. So we've got painting and things like that that we've got budgeted here, along with the compressor rebuild at Baytex. Vehicle costs. So we've seen over the years larger increases, which is being driven by Zamboni inspection costs and the cost to service those assets. And as mentioned, bit of a broken record here now, but amortization is, there's a big increase to our debt and capital charges to reflect the amortization on community services assets.
So does that mean like the Baytex would be there or some piece
That
of
would be
it?
the chunk.
Okay. Any other questions? Or sorry, Eric, are you?
Yep, no,
Yeah, good. Any other questions on that?
Kind of this might be, I'm not saying this is a tonight answer, but I'm just noticing the utility costs are all going up because they're going up for everybody. And so, just as a bit of a curiosity, what would be our, not for tonight, I'm not gonna ask you to bust your calculator right now, what would be our total utility cost increase, maybe as a number, percentage and dollar wise from last to this? I'm willing to bet it's quite a large.
I don't have the
Yeah,
precise
I
number.
wouldn't expect you to.
I think it's in the low six figures for the tax supported budget.
Yeah.
But I don't have the precise figure, but we can bring that back.
Did you want to know the water and the other part?
Well, say
too,
for
right?
example, like, so we were looking at 3%, and I know this isn't the exact number, but 1% is approximately $100,000. So if you're like, okay, well, what chews up 3%? Well, one and a bit of the 3% is straight utility costs, and probably a decent portion of that is carbon. So someone's wondering why the number is what it is. That would be a large.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Again, when I highlighted utilities as one, her CMP costs are another, that it's those two items alone chewing up a significant amount of our increases.
Yeah.
And that's why we really spent a lot of time going through and scrutinizing those other items to reduce in areas that we can.
Yeah, like I'd say 3% is like a miracle. Like I'm super impressed.
Well, again,
Given the increase in that the other assumptions we're putting in, so how many FTEs were going up as well, and some of these other things, right? Like that. I'm not saying it should be more, I'm just surprised it isn't, and thank you.
Our approach was to present a number that we felt that the council and the public would find acceptable, given the economic circumstances at the time. The result of this budget, I'll get to this when we get to the next slide, is the overall contribution to capital when you normalize for these changes to our budgeting methodology is lower this year than it was last year.
Mhm.
So that means that on the capital side of things, we won't be able to do as much. Now there's some reasons why we're comfortable with that at this point in time. There needs to be a discussion with council as at what's a reasonable level for us to be putting money away into reserves to fund those future capital needs. And again, this budget, it could always be higher, but we also have to balance off what our residents can afford.
So kind of, I'm not saying hiding in there as in you're trying to be shady, but kind of inside that comment you just made is sort of an idea of probably not a sustainable thing in terms of what we're putting into capital if it's decreased since, previous years. Potentially.
I wouldn't say it's not sustainable.
Okay.
I'd say that if for this year, it is lower.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go so far as to say that what we're presenting isn't a sustainable budget. Again, if the capital needs in future years require it, and again, when we come back with our capital budget, we'll show you how we intend to pay for next year's items and break that down. But yeah, and again, one of the benefits of breaking out the utility costs is we're forcing our utilities to now stand on their own. That wasn't happening in the past. And so now we'll really have a sense of where those rates need to be to ensure that their future capital needs are met.
And a large portion of our, let's say, unfunded infrastructure deficit would be on the utility side.
I think that's a fair comment. I don't have the exact breakdown of our roads worse than our.
I see Mr. Finger subconsciously nodding, so we maybe might get close there.
Pretty consistent. It's your biggest asset.
Mhm. Okay,
So to a certain extent, this amortization change of doing, or putting it down on the paper, it's kind of, it's impacting reserves as well. Did I kind of get that? Because you're putting money in some reserves a little bit.
Yeah, we still are, it's the presentation is a little bit different, so if there's no further questions.
Councilor Ford?
So item 21, the salaries and benefits, is that, to do with the presentation from community services coming up with the change from position to manager and another FTE? Is that due to this increase here? If approved?
Yeah, there's a very modest increase associated with upgrading the position. Then there's an additional position, and that's offset partially by the elimination of a portion. There's a fractional FTE that was eliminated. And also that difference is, we are anticipating that, as I said, the collective agreement isn't resolved at this point, but we are anticipating that there will be some costs associated with that.
CAO Miller?
I was just gonna add too, is if we can not rely on debt for a little while, as our debt pays down and our interest expense decreases each year, then it will help sustain our operating budget.
So thank you. I've got a question about, it has to do with vehicles. And I see somewhere we're thinking of buying, out the leases. So will that change the operating budget? Because we understood when we got into that the leasing costs were kind of, operational, but buying an actual vehicle, not leasing it, so that was capital. So we decreased our capital, but so is it going reverse now? That would be the implication?
So basically, like I've included in our budget a reduction. So it's, the budget is currently assuming that we do purchase out the leases that are before council this evening. So that will reduce the operating burden on the budget. It's an area that I think, we still need to do a bit more work on like with our current provider, the current leasing provider, to determine at what point we should either be returning the vehicles to them or buying them out. Again, when this item comes up next, I'll get into the detail of why we're recommending the purchase of these vehicles, but they're still very young in their in terms of the number of miles and things on.
So it did take a little away from the operating.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know, thanks. Any other questions at this point before Mr. Muckford carries on? Okay.
So on this slide, this is the it's kind of a summary slide, and so I wanted to speak to what you're seeing last year versus this year. So in the previous year, your revenues less expenses, zeros, and it's zeros because the difference or the surplus was shown as an expense between contribution to capital and principal. This is principal on short-term debt. It's actually principal payment on long-term debt is short and long-term is what comprises that number. So in the 2024 budget, we are showing $4.2 million of amortization expense related to tax supported assets. So you're seeing amortization amount here, and in the utility budget, which I presented last week, there's an expense there as well. So the cumulative of those two numbers is overall amortization expense for the organization. Additionally, we're still including in our expenses for 2024 the principal on debt as well. So both of those items are included in this $27 million worth of expense. So if you look at the 2024 budget on just straight revenues less expenses, it shows that we're operating at a loss because now which is very common. This is very common across many municipalities where your amortization expense puts you in a loss situation, and then when you recognize the capital grant funding, that comes in as revenue below the line, and that brings you back up. So, this isn't abnormal, but again, when we go through the exercise of normalizing how much is actually going into reserves, the current budget doesn't contribute as much to reserves as a prior year budget does.
Very good.
Well, the two items are not directly, they're not directly connected, but they are to a degree connected. Would that be a fair statement? It's not $1 here, $1 here.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so but there's some sort of ebb and flow through it. And the ebb and flow to some degree would be the amortization period would moderate that. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, they ultimately deal with the same concept, which is how you spend or fund your capital needs. You know, if you exclude amortization as an expense, and you just look at, here's your revenues, here's your expenses, the difference is what you can spend on capital. So it's that amount plus whatever funding you recognize from the other levels of government. So those two things, how much we add as reserves and how much we receive from third parties, that's how much we can spend on capital. And the use of debt financing can change the timing of when you need to draw on those reserves. So depending on the nature of what you're buying, you can make different cases one way or the other, whether or not debt financing is appropriate to, as Ms. Miller discussed, to spread the cost over the users of that asset.
Amortization, if I'm correct, if we bought $1 million item this year, we amortized it over 10. If the council in their wisdom or the town's wisdom decided to buy another $1 million item a year later, they could amortize it over whatever, same period of time or whatever they choose. But that amortization is if I'm correct, is not a fixed amount, it's a chosen amount. Am I correct? So as you, on good budgetary practices, you'll come up with a number. I'm not saying it's totally arbitrary, but it is to some degree choosable. I can't think of another word.
So there is an element of, management's estimate of what the useful life would be. But there's also, these are audited numbers. So the auditor would look at, if we purchased a building or we constructed a new building and we say, oh, we want to amortize it over 10 years, our auditor would look at us and say, no, that's not consistent with what is generally accepted accounting practices for that asset.
So you're within a range. Okay, fair, I get it.
Miller?
So I wanted to add to that in that we do have a tangible capital asset policy. So that speaks to the years that the asset gets amortized over, depending on the asset. So there's different classes, and wherever that asset falls into that class, that's the amount of time it gets amortized over. And those years that were used in that policy were pretty much, they look like what was recommended by the government when TCA became a requirement back in 2008.
So if I may, just so I could try to understand this. So a comparable would be, you put a pipe in the ground. You're gonna figure a 50-year life, right? So you would either fund it or advertise it or reserve it or whatever. You're just finding, what you're doing is managing that asset over a period of time. And amortization is a factor in the management of that asset. Would that be an accurate statement? Yes. Sorry, thank you.
And again, it's a relatively new concept. And it's something that is, it's still discussion that we have sometimes. It's something, does it meet the criteria to be capitalized or not? Is it a betterment? Is it extending the useful life of the asset, or is it just repairing and maintaining the asset? If you're putting a new roof on a building versus painting the building, those types of things. There's always a little bit of room for kind of that interpretation, but as a CEO Miller said, we have a policy that tries to make us as consistent as possible.
Any other questions?
I'm just trying to get comfortable with the concept.
So when the auditor gives, we look at the audited statements each year and they kind of make up this amortization number that matches this with this, so everything's equal. That's this different concept than what we're discussing here.
No, so within the town's audited financial statements, we show the amortization expense. This is why it's important to budget it that way as well, because previously your budget would show you in the black, but then your actuals would show you in the red because of that amortization expense. And then only below the line would you see all of the third-party grant funding come in that then brings you back into the black. So this will ultimately make our annual financial statements more, equivalence of fair term.
Well, we're getting a good accounting lesson here today. Thank you. Councillor Boychuk, you have a question?
Yes, sorry for popping in late, but I have been listening to your whole presentation there, Sam, so I got two questions for you. Is there any way we track the grants that we applied for, the ones that we don't get? Like, is that, do we track that at all? Say, like, if we apply for a whole bunch of stuff through FCSF and we don't get it, do we track that at all?
I'm gonna speak to that because that's something that we've talked about and we are going to start doing that. Because it's important to be able to go, in my mind, to the ministers and say, we've applied for these with no results. We don't have any data. So we've discussed that at the director's table and we will initiate that for the new year.
And the second question, I'm just throwing this out there, I have no idea, but I've been after the RCMP to see what our costs are in overtime for transporting patients. And since that's working for HS, is there any way we can go after them for that money? Because they're literally being a service for either the province or HS. They're not serving our community when somebody's farm. And we're paying for it. So I'm just wondering if there's some way we could recoup some of those funds.
Well, what I would suggest then is we try to obtain that isolated information. And then we'll bring it back to council and seek a motion of direction from council.
Any other questions? Hey, Mr. Buckford.
Okay, so that brings us to the last slide, which I've already heard questions, but again, thanks to administration and their staff and staff for contributing to the budget process so far. I do believe the budget is one of the most critical functions of government, and it's as such, it's one of the most important documents that council approves each year. We've invested a significant amount of time in preparing and reviewing this document. Again, I think we've made good progress in trying to find the balance between the needs of the organization and the expectations of residents and what they would find reasonable. So again, this document or any revisions to this, when we bring back to council, I will highlight any changes that have been made as we continue through this process, and the goal will be to bring this back for approval in December. Thank you.
So the information brought to us tonight, I guess councillors, I'll just say again that we need to ask questions during these processes and not leave it the last day when suddenly we're going to vote and somebody says, well, that's too much or too little, whatever. So it's important that we ask questions of whatever we're we're hearing here. There's gonna be new information and other parts of the budget still to come, but
The question that brings to me is, when we talk about the areas that we have sort of agreement on, we talk about the areas we don't have agreement on at this point, technically, and also the PRETA situation and some of the others that we want to have discussed. When will be the opportunity to bring those questions for clarification to council? Because again, part of having an agreement is having a real understanding. I mean, you can't agree on what you don't understand, and you can't agree if you're not talking the same language. And so what I'd like to ask is, what are the plans to bring, for example, the PRETA discussion or I think we do have sort of a tacit agreement on EDO, but even bring that, let's get it nailed, right? Let's get some of these other things as yes or no, yes, that's the direction this council wishes to go, that's what we want to achieve. I like, I think some of the misunderstandings we've had in the past have a long time been as much on terminology and understanding where we're going in direction. Why not see if we can roll on the same page and get to the same and have those discussions, sometimes difficult, but have them really clear. So I guess I'm asking again, what's the good process for raising forward? How do we get brought to council? Because I'd like to see them kind of nailed,
yeah,
solid.
I would agree with you. And the expectation would be then that people are committing or not committing to a certain extent. So CAO Miller, I'll direct the questions to you perhaps.
So I think my thoughts are we could put some time in next council meeting. And then we have GMP in December to have, because we will also be bringing in utilities and we'll be having capital discussion. And if we can't get through it, we may end up having to schedule another budget discussion because we have a lot we want to get through and adopted, before.
Sure.
But that's what I would start with. So sometime next meeting and then definitely the GMP in December. And then we'll see from there what we need.
And an understanding of some of those items is, are they, because my understanding is some of those things, like some of the salary things were included in this budget. They're included in here, it's clear. And some of the things kind of aren't like the PRETA thing is not included, but could be. It might change the number here or there or anywhere, which we might be good with, but we may not be. But I think we have to have that understanding of what's in them.
So I think when Mr. Mugford went over the key assumptions, if this budget did include the CPO position, economic development position, and restructuring of community services, some positions. So they were in this already.
It was basically PRETA was one of the ones.
The ones that were not were PRETA, NTAB, and that was a phone. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So just one comment or response. If there's specific areas that council would like us to do a deeper dive on, we could bring back that level of detail as well. So again, I presented this at an object category level, but if you want to know, what do we think the cost of one of these individual changes is, so you can have better understanding of the details of it. Then certainly we can do that. And if you email us, then or let CEO Miller know, then we can prepare that detail.
Thank you. Councillor Shannon?
I just wondered about, actually, it's okay. I think I know what it is. It's okay.
Any other questions?
One more.
Councillor Shannon?
Okay, no, it's not okay. Sorry about that. I'm just gonna ask, for instance, now you mentioned murals were already in the budget.
Correct, yeah.
So, like, I'm just using that as an example. So say if we would wanted to see something other than murals, the money being spent on murals, we want something else downtown. Where does that come from then? Is that decision made at the, is that where?
It's certainly something that is subject to council's discussion and approval.
I'm just asking because, for an example, because you said anything you disagree with, say now or not later, like, so how deep do you get into that is my only question, like things like, yeah.
Yeah, and again, in this presentation, I was trying to highlight areas where it was a change year over year. Now murals, just from past experience, there's a fair bit of discussion on it, so I did mention that there's still a budget for it. But that budget, you know, you could discuss, it's too high, too low, move it somewhere else, that's, if that's a topic that you want to discuss, then certainly bring you back more information.
So, CAO Miller, would you prefer that, we just list some topics off the top of our head right now? Or more information to come forth, or what's
It would be
your?
awesome if I could just get an email
an
and
email?
then we'll just put them together,
Okay,
if that's okay.
so counselors, are you okay with, emailing CEO Miller, copies to the rest of us, and that's sufficient? Yeah? Okay, you should do it quicker than later.
And then I think my intention is, I think we're gonna do, I'd like to see us do a good presentation on amortization and the difference between that and contribution to capital, and then how the money moves into reserves and moves out. So I think we'll spend a little bit of time, either next meeting or the GMP in December as well, kind of getting a good understanding of that, because it will help other things flow, I think.
Okay, so the intent though is still timeline for budget, as was mentioned, is December. That is the hope. The takeaway after December is whatever the educational levy and North Peace housing would be, the additional things that people see on what they call their tax bill. But those are beyond our charge right now. So, okay.
So, excuse me, your worship, so then we do, the intention is to have all budgets adopted in the December regular council meeting, right?
And realize we have a GNP and one council meeting, I think.
And as you said, have a special meeting if we deem necessary.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Medford. I realize a lot of behind the scenes work has gone into this from yourself and the rest of the directors and staff. We look forward to more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
And perhaps someone would move that council accept the draft 2023 budget presentation for information. Councillor Good, so moves. Okay, all those in favor? It's okay. All those in favor of the motion? Yeah, opposed? It is carried. Thank you. Next up, we have the enterprise vehicle buyout with Mr. Buckford again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So that issue is, 5 of the town's leased light trucks, have reached the expiration of their leasing term. The town has an option to buy the vehicles, continue to lease them or to exchange them in for newer models. So the town currently has a mixed portfolio of leased and owned vehicles. 5 units, they're F-250s, had their lease term expire in September 30th of this year. The town has an option to purchase these vehicles. The average cost to buy out a unit is just under $12,000. Leasing costs are $13,592 per unit per year, with the payments going towards the depreciation of the units. So, and all the units have been assessed and are in good working order, and they're low mileage. So the average mileage is approximately 32,000 kilometers for those vehicles. The options before council are to purchase the vehicles for an estimated cost of $57,796. Advantages are it would reduce our lease costs, so it would take that burden off the operating budget, and it would lower our financing charges, and that exceeds the expected return on the investment. So the disadvantages are it will increase the average age of our fleet if we elect to do that rather than replace it with a newer model. And there's an opportunity cost on that investment if you use that $58,000 or something else. Financial implications are $57,796 draw from unallocated MSI capital grant funding to purchase the vehicles outright. with then a minimal annual amortization cost associated with owning those assets. That's offset by a yearly reduction of $59,710 in the operating budget. Option 2 is to return the units to enterprise and lease with new units. So that would reduce the age of the fleet, and it would defer the capital outlay. But the disadvantages are it's going to increase our operating cost, and it's going to increase we anticipate it would increase the total cost of ownership. Estimated financial implications, so the estimated cost to lease the 5 new vehicles, approximately $2,000 per year. And, but there'd be no draw on the remaining MSI capital funds, so they could be used, deployed for something else. Option 3 is just to continue to lease the existing unit, so there's really no advantages to doing that, because it would result in a higher operating account cost, and it would still continue to age the fleet. So financial implications, the annual lease expense of $67,960. It would remain in our operating budgets. That would continue to be a burden there. But as I said, with option 2, there'd be no draw on the remaining MSI capital funds. So the recommendation from administration is that council approve the purchase of the 5 F-250s for a cost of up to $60,000, with such purchase being funded from the unallocated MSI capital funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, do you have questions? Councilor Boychuk?
How old are these vehicles?
I think they're 4 years old. Subject to check.
And what's the average kilometers that we usually keep a vehicle for? Like, if these things only have 30,000, I'm thinking they could get well over 100.
Yeah, I don't have that information offhand, but I can get that for you.
Councilor Good?
Part of the reason for leasing, was that, I mean, there's arguments on both sides of the fence, and I do understand that. One of them includes, for example, that during the lease period or during the warranty period, you don't end up having to pay for certain repairs, which once you bought the unit, those repairs are on you. So, when you talk about the yearly cost, and I do understand about the, lower cost of ownership, does that also include the cost? Have you sort of, to a degree, taken a look at the cost of repairs over the, let's say the next 5 years of ownership rather than leasing? Because now they're now our expense to repair. Has that been factored into it?
So it's certainly something that was considered. I think the mileage on the vehicles being as low as it is lends itself towards there's likely going to be less. And there's always uncertainty, right? You might have a new vehicle that breaks, and if it's on warranty or if it's being leased, it's somebody else's problem. If you own it yourself and it's not on warranty, then you're incurring those costs. But you know, when we look at the cost of continuing to lease these vehicles versus what we expect those repairs would be on those vehicles, the repairs are significantly less over that period.
One of the things we were taking a look at, the reason we even went down this road, was that the life expectancy of the vehicle, we were running them, you know, honest with you, into the dirt. And we were running them to the point where the vehicles were some of them were extremely old. I mean, the ones we replaced, if I remember you correct, probably had grandkids. I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic, but I mean, they were old. And the operational costs, they were considerable. And so there's probably a balance point. If we buy them and they work for, let's say we take them to 100,000 kilometers, maybe that's legitimate. But my danger is that once you get into the ownership position, it's always easy for somebody to say, well, same as we do with our infrastructure, we don't have to replace it this year. We don't have to deal with it this year. We can put it off for never, long, which we've done with our infrastructure, which we've done with many things. Leasing to a degree avoids that uncertainty because you're basically rolling it through. So I'm not saying yes or no to it. I kind of need a bit more comfort with some of the numbers and real comparables, because I did a quick leasing cost of 5 vehicles was 82,000, which is 16,400 a year to lease. So 16,400 a year to lease, gives you no maintenance or minimal maintenance costs except for the oil change. Am I wrong on this? So, I mean, sort of walk me through the first.
CAO Miller's got some info. Sorry, I'm like, no,
So lease, whether you lease or you purchase, warranty covers warranty.
Right.
Lease does not cover maintenance and repair. And it actually forces you to ensure your maintenance and repair, where otherwise you may say, oh, I could go a little bit longer. You're more or less obligated to maintain the recommended repair schedule or maintenance schedule, because should you turn those vehicles back, and if you don't do that, then you lose value or they charge you more when you return the vehicle, right?
For good reason.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is that that's why in part and in large TCA became a requirement, because councils would come in and see $200,000 in their financial statements of vehicles. And it doesn't say, because you weren't amortizing them and aging them, they would say, wow, we have $200,000 worth of vehicles, but the vehicles could be 25 years old and not worth anything. So in part, that's why TCA came about, because it wasn't just vehicles, it was all assets, right? And so then councils can look at the financial statements, see the value of their assets and recognize that they're not worth anything. Next thing is, the key is having an asset management policy and having trust in your administration. So if your administration is not padding the budget and bringing true and honest budgets forward, and if you have an asset management policy, and council has bought into that policy, and you have that 10-year asset management plan, the hope is that if it says you buy 3 vehicles each year, because that's what you need to maintain your policy, that all of council's on board and maintains and stays with that policy. And that's again why the government forced municipalities to do 10-year capital plans as well, right? So I'd like to think this council is not gonna walk that way. We'd like to have that asset management plan, at least development started before a future election, and get this council on the right track. So that will never happen again, where they'll say, no, no, no. And we have to be able to fund it. We have to be able to prove through our asset management plan that we can fund what we need as we go along. So then those decisions don't happen where they say, no, we're not gonna.
That's what I'm sort of asking for, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, municipal accounting was kind of imaginary accounting for years to a large extent.
Yeah.
It didn't address a lot of things that are being addressed now, so I agree with you. What I'm looking for is a better level of comfort in saying, yes, if we're gonna talk about a policy or agree with the policy, which is our end of it, is to take a look at that asset management policy. Here's the thought that went into that asset management policy. Here's where we took a look at what buying the vehicle did and their expected costs of maintenance, et cetera, so forth and so on. On general, I mean, you can't, again, there are unknowns. I agree with that. I have no issue with that. But I don't quite have enough information from this piece of paper to just jump and say, yeah, let's go make that decision. That's all I'm saying. That's just for me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Scanlon.
When was the purchase price of these vehicles set? Was it when we originally leased them? So one that this might give you a little bit more comfort is what's happened to the price of vehicles since we've actually leased these vehicles. And we, I think, really super lucked out on catching lightning in a bottle here, because the purchase price on these vehicles now, being that it was set that many years ago, if you were to go and purchase a 2019 3/4 ton vehicle on the open market with 32,000 kilometers, you'd probably pay equal to what you would have paid for it in its day new.
Yeah.
So I am 100% behind buying these things at where they are at now, given that that price was set at that time. Because I mean, geez, if we wanted to make some money and we wanted to lease, we would buy these out, sell them ourselves and lease anyway. We'd be money ahead if we did that. So there's all kinds of ways to win on this one, and I would say, even if we didn't want to keep them, I would say buy them.
CAO Miller, is your response to this point or something else? Council Boychuk has something too, so. To this point, that point? Okay, Councilor Boychuk, you have a different point?
I agree with Byron here. This looks too good to be true. So if we buy these out and they last a year, we're gonna be saving 10 grand versus the lease, and then every year after that, we're gonna be saving 70, almost 70 grand, right? Every year that all 5 of these survive. So
To a certain extent.
I speak well enough.
Is the count- Okay, whoever wishes to go for a CAO or Mr. Mumford. Up to you guys.
I was just gonna say, the asset management plan I have, that's something we have to work towards, right? And then that policy, and that's what will come forward, and council will make those decisions on how long we're gonna maintain vehicles. Is it 7 years or 10 years or whatever? And my goal this year and moving forward for the next couple of years is trying to reduce the operating cost. Because the leases right now are well over 350,000 a year for leasing costs. I mean, that includes our big equipment, but that's a lot of money that if we can, when we're not necessarily cash poor at the moment, and where we can, for small amounts of money, reduce some of that burden. That's my goal right now, is try to reduce some of the burden on the operating costs as we, and in the future, it may be a mix, it may be a blend of so many lease vehicles and so many purchased turned over. I don't know what that'll look like right now, but trying to ease that burden on our taxpayers at the moment.
Director Mumford?
Yeah, just again, to echo some of what CEO Miller was saying, like what in my past experience, you'd have a vehicle replacement policy, which at the beginning of council's term, they'd have a chance to review. So your hands aren't tied. If the policy says replace it after 7 years and make the decision to push it to 8, that's one thing, but your council would still be making the choice to go against the policy that they reviewed and they agreed upon. So comparing that with it being a line item that appears in the operating budget and you're not really knowing the details of that, what comprises it, to me, it's just more transparent to have a policy in place that says, you know, at this age, at this number of miles, that's when you replace the vehicles. And then you can get to a point where you're doing a few every year, so it's not like it's one huge burden at one time.
I'm just gonna check in one word, sorry. We're having our own discussion. We even need to put in play, which we're just starting to, fleet management. So for example, this vehicle is getting used all the time, and it's got 30,000 kilometers, but the one that's been sitting here never moves, has 1,200 kilometers. So we need to even get where we're managing our fleet, so something's not mileaging out and not aging out. And you're following me, right? So then we move them around the organization to get the best value out of all of our vehicles. So again, we've only been here and starting to try to get some of these things in play, but that's also a key component of asset management of your vehicles is fleet management, moving them around.
So just comment, part of the reason the council got into fleet management at the time was to lessen their capital costs. So there's positive and negatives on both sides, and for a variety of reasons, one works in one time frame and the next time frame it might be something else. So we just need that asset management plan to help us along in some of these long-term decisions. And other things, new styles of vehicles and the fleet management thing will certainly help us. My question is, we're planning on taking about 60,000 from the unallocated MSI capital. Did we have a different plan for that, or was that kind of an emergency something?
No, so it's unallocated at this point. So again, we have.
And it wasn't part of neighborhood improvement in the future?
Correct, it wasn't previously, so there's and again, subject to check, about $900,000 of unallocated MSI right now. And there's some funds that will be coming back, so they were previously put to a budget that then wasn't fully utilized. So once we close up the reporting on that, then those would go back into it. So it is something that as we get further into our capital budget, we're looking at which pots of money to pull from, and be considering that. Just strictly, if this was coming from MSI or whether it's coming from reserves, the recommendation would still be the same for the administration that council received.
Just MSI seems more freer than reserves for some reason. Okay, council, no more questions? Would someone care to put forth a motion on this matter?
Yeah.
Councilor Scanlon.
I'm just gonna read it off. I'll move that council approve the purchase of 5 Chevrolet, I'm gonna say 3/4 ton units, because they have 250s or 4s. Units 101, 103, 104, 106, and 108 for the cost of up to $60,000. So the purchase being funded from unallocated MSI capital fund.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? It is carried.
Not that I'm opposed to Fords, just.
Thank you, Mr. Mugford.
Thank you.
Okay, next up,
What's that?
okay, good to know. The next step, we have, MPC, Municipal Planning Commission member appointment with, Director Fisher. To brief us on this.
Thank you. Good evening, council. So our municipal planning commission basically helps us by reviewing and making decisions on discretionary uses within town for development applications. They also provide advice to administration on strategic planning processes and council. So it's basically established by a bylaw 1993, which is attached in the reports here. We had one of the existing members moved into one of the neighboring counties and out of the town of Peace River. And it is a requirement in the bylaw that they be a resident of the town. There is the ability for council to grant an exception to that rule, as long as we have one non-resident on the commission. And they've got a substantial connection that is for the good of the town. Mr. Ashfield is one of the members, or is the member who moved out of the town. In discussions with him, if possible, he'd like to stay involved. He's already trained to sit on the committee, and he participates. We currently have an open position on the municipal planning commission. So it would not prevent a resident, if they wanted to get involved, from applying to be part of this committee. And that's advertised on our Town of Peace River webpage. If somebody from the public wanted to join. Mr. Ashford is the managing director at Mercer Peace River Pulp Mill. So it's a substantial employer in the area. They're an active corporate citizen. And administration thinks that this is probably a reasonable grounds to say that he's got a substantial connection to the community. We've got 2 options that we've included in our report here. One is that council approve Mr. Ashfield to stay on the MPC. And option 2 is that council decline request to keep him on MPC. And I think there's some general benefit to keeping him involved. Again, he's trained. It helps us make sure that we've got quorum if we hold a meeting by having residents, and it doesn't detract from another member of the public from getting involved. So my recommendation is that council approve Roger Ashfield to continue membership on the MPC as a non-resident member pursuant to bylaw number 19339A as a member who has substantial connections to the town of Peace River.
Thank you. Councilors, questions, discussion? Councilor Wojciech?
there any way that this can be a conflict of interest for somebody that doesn't live in our town, or what's the purpose of non-residents not being allowed?
I am not clear. I think it was just when the bylaw was written, that was a desire.
I think they're also making, decisions basically about town properties, shall we say, or properties within the town, so that's probably why there's a limited out of town part of it. Oh, got everybody here. Counselor Ford, Counselor Good, and Counselor Carr.
I just, noticed during your presentation that you said that he's trained to be on this board, so I thought this board was by appointment and it was the subdivision appeal board that had to have the legal training.
I think we provide training.
Oh, there is, okay, I was not aware of that.
It's training provided by our manager of planning and development.
Okay.
And I don't think that there's a requirement for external training, but they do get training.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Commission training.
My memory is that there was, we didn't want the MPC to be populated with a bunch of people from outside, a bunch of people. I'm using the term really almost accurately. But I think the reason for the exceptions was because we realized that there were, one of the things that I've always felt about, because I've talked a lot about regionalization and I believe we should be a region, but having said that, not even getting into that discussion. One of the difficulties I've always had is you can have a business owner, for example, who lives outside the town and who works inside the town, plays inside the town, hires people inside the town. The only difference between him and me is that I live in the town. That's the only difference. His mailbox could be in town. He could be getting his mail at the post office. He could be coming in town to buy his groceries. Other than where he sleeps, he's in town. Now, in this case, he works outside of town, but not that far. And also, when I consider that, I think the last time I looked at the numbers, around 85% of employees at Mercer live either in Peace River or Grimshaw. That's a substantial tie in my mind of Mercer to the town of Peace River. So I think Mark, although there were reasons for not wanting to be populated by people outside or a whole group of people outside, I think there was the understanding at the time the bylaw was done that there are some people whose ties are substantial enough that you can consider that. I'm not trying to put a decision in your mind, but I think that was the thought behind it.
Thank you, Counselor Good. Counselor Carr.
Will we have to amend the bylaw in some way to allow for this?
No, it's already in there to permit a non-resident member. It's got to be approved by council. It's coming to seek an RFP.
So it's like approving other members at large, showing this is, well, this is like a member at large for anything we get to approve it or not. Okay, any further discussion, new discussion? Okay, would someone care to put forth a motion on this matter?
Yeah. I'll move that council approves Roger Ashfield's continued membership on the Municipal Planning Commission as a non-resident member pursuant to bylaw number 1993, 9A, as a member who has substantial connections to the town of Peace River.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those opposed? I'm checking if you're, all those opposed, I'm checking to see if you're awake and listening. I went to a seminar and I can ask if you're opposed before you're, all those in favor. The motion. Okay, it is carried. Thank you. Okay, the next, I suggest that we, carry on here with this section, and at the end of the section, we'll have a break. So, next up, we have Ms. Bell, Director of Community Services. Topic of Manager of Recreation and Parks.
No, you didn't switch the order of parks and recreation? You didn't?
For maybe a reason.
Okay. I just like the way pop culture finds its way into council.
Put it in the background.
Thank you, your worship and council. I've just handed out some paper versions of some organizational charts to illustrate the proposal in the RFP before you, and we'll make sure these are also attached on Civic Web for public viewing. The manager of recreation and parks position as proposed this evening in the RFD is actually an increase to an existing position, which is the recreation facilities coordinator. The recreation facilities coordinator is responsible for the majority of recreational facilities, parks, playgrounds, green space, Athabasca Hall, the library, and a multitude of other functions underneath them, such as tree maintenance, flowers, green space contract, and others. The administration is proposing to increase the recreation facility coordinator position to a manager position. We are doing this as part of a 2024 budget request. We're doing it ahead of the budget process. Unfortunately, we've had a resignation of our current recreation facility coordinator, Brian Willis. So that sort of precipitated the speed up of the request. Normally, we would have done this as part of the overall budget discussion that Director Mugford presented to you this evening as a preliminary discussion. Therefore, it's sort of timely for us to make this request of council, as we'd like to post for the new manager position, if council so agrees, and fill that position as we're presenting this evening. With moving this position or creating this position into a manager level, we would look to move some functions that are directly reporting under the director position, specifically the aquatics, over to the manager. Therefore, if you look at your structural charts that I handed out, the first chart provides you with a current structure indicating aquatics is currently under the Director of Community Services. Your second chart shows the new manager position with its existing recreation facilities. Our proposed new parks lead, however, we're not requesting that position this evening, and showing the movement of the change of reporting to aquatics to under the new manager position. Your third chart shows the proposed final organizational structure for the Community Services Department. The policy of the organizational staffing policy requires a full organizational analysis, needs analysis to be presented to council. That information is presented within the RFP for your review. As noted, it'll be changed just to an increase to a manager position. Some of the service or functional redundancy with this change essentially shifts responsibility for aquatics over to the manager position, allows your director to spend more time on broader, longer term planning, which is not as effective right now with so many direct reports in its current structure. There won't be an impact to service levels. It has no impact, either increase or decrease. It allows staff to just shift a bit of a focus of who's responsible to whom. The budgetary impacts. There's a slight increase as you increase the classification of the position to a manager level. So there's an approximately potential upwards of 20,000 to 21,000 a year. And I say potential because where that individual falls on the grid is yet to be determined and would be determined by administration based on qualifications and the like. The benefits, just notes on benefits to the employee, those all stay the same as they're currently budgeted for the existing positions. So there's no impact there, maybe a slight impact or a slight increase based on potential wage increase, but minuscule and not significant. Overall, the benefits from an internal organizational process, the real benefit to the department is more consistency between our two significant recreation facilities. We have the aquatics, the Peace Regional Pool, and the Baytex Energy Center. They sort of operate separately at this point. Not necessarily there'll be direct operational crossover, but we would have more consistency between the two facilities if they're underneath one management structure. A little bit of that silo operation inevitably occurs, and this would help to reduce that. And again, enabling your director to spend more time on the long-term planning, some of the asset management components that we have just started, and a lot more to do. I'm very involved in a lot of the day-to-day of the aquatics, and it takes a substantial amount of time. So when we look into the options, option one is approving the change of the classification of the recreation facilities coordinator to manager position of recreation and parks, not parks and recreation. There, as noted, the advantages to this allows some streamline, it supports the organizational challenges to assist us in moving away from some of those challenges. And also, we really need to look at succession planning. This is it with succession planning. Just saying. 25 years and counting. The financial implications is slightly incorrect. This is my mistake on the RFD presented to council tonight. I put in the range on the options prior to putting in the actual salary grid information from HR. Once the salary grid information was added, my range need to be adjusted. It's closer to a $15,000 to $20,000 increase to the 2024 potential increase to the 2024 operating budget. And also reminder that there are offsets for our increases within the recreation realm with the ICF agreements. Option two is council to decline creating this or increasing the manager position or the recreation facility coordinator position to manager classification. Disadvantages of this, again, it's that ability to recruit and retain. We are looking for a very highly qualified individual for this position. Manager level classifications definitely attract potentially a higher qualified individual. That would be the sum of all the parts. Are there any questions?
Councillor Scammahorn?
So is this change, it appears to be, and you can confirm this, and please keep talking in the third person, that's been my favorite of your presentations so far. Is this a change consistent with the organizational review that we had done, I want to say a year and a half ago?
It's fairly consistent. The organizational review didn't go to this level.
But it captured the spirit
reorganization.
of your
Yep.
position,
Yep.
the director position,
Yep.
having too many people reporting.
Correct. Yeah, the span of control for a director at very minimum is 5 to 7.
Okay.
And I'm averaging 9 to 10, give or take a few that get added, moved around.
That's 25 years of experience. It
Yeah.
does that to one probably.
Yeah, it builds up on it, and it'd be very difficult to refill a director position with this very flat structure. It is not the norm. If you look at any other community in comparison, Slave Lake, Drayton Valley, Devon, Edson, their structures are much different. You'll see typically 2 managers, usually a manager of social development with the FCSS component. Maybe culture would be included there or over onto the recreation side. So typically you would have multiple managers, and we're suggesting to start with this point.
Is that your question? Done?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, so, if council were to, approve this change, are we also in effect really making 2 changes with the Parks Lead incorporated in here if the plan is to work?
Ideally, I would have liked to have brought both positions together. I think it makes sense as a package. Unfortunately, we're in a different timing situation that doesn't, I don't want to say one is the other. We are set with sorry, we're presenting them as two separate positions, so the second parks lead position would come back at a later date. So the decision doesn't predicate you that you must provide the other position. We would just adjust our service levels and our processes to work with the new structure.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Carr, you were good.
I read the report earlier and it indicated that you have 10 reports to do, or will have 10 reports to do. Has there been any consideration of shifting any of these responsibilities to other departments like Public Works? And for example, parks and that sort of thing?
Not specifically. Because the problem with doing that is, with our Baytex Energy staff, they're recreation operators. So they're in the building, operating the building for the winter and then move into parks into the summer. It'd be a substantive, significant shifting some of that over into Public Works. And it really wouldn't change anything in terms of who's supervising.
The reason I ask that is because at present we hire summer students to do garbage pickup and whatever, you know, that sort of thing. If we were to shift it, and this is just thinking, I'm not directing, I'm just thinking. Like for example, I used the pathway along the river at the north end more this year than I ever have, to be honest. And it's drastically overgrown. And I'm thinking if it was with Public Works, when they have a slow day, they send somebody out to trim a little more of that path. We only have about 3 months with those summer students and they're gone.
That's where the parks lead position, you're just leading right into that next piece, will be pretty critical in terms of improving service levels on those exact examples, because they would be able to provide that service 12 months out of the year and not just seasonally. So a lot of those situations, the downtime for the winter months, when we're looking at the parks position, we're pull over some of the work that Public Works is currently doing, specifically outdoor rinks. But in between development and maintenance of those outdoor rinks, this individual could be out doing tree maintenance, tree trimming. There's quite a lot they can do in parks and green space through the winter months.
So who specifically are you saying would be out doing that?
The proposed new parks lead position, it would be an on the ground individual that would actually physically be out doing tree trimming, outdoor rinks, leading the summer staff, that type of thing. Now I'm segueing into the second position that we can discuss in much more depth at a later ask. But that would assist.
I'll throw in a comment with respect to Public Works and Parks. Before the Baytex, I think when there was some staff changing there, I think Public Works was more responsible for some of the parks elements. And it seemed that quite frankly, the Public Works had their own duties and they were busy enough that sometimes they just never got to the parks part. So it was, at that time, it was better to separate them. And I'm just throwing that out there as a comment at that time, and who knows.
There's definitely, if I could just add, again, municipalities, everyone has similar yet slightly different. We've seen this structure where parks is under Public Works. We've seen the structure where parks is under community services. It seems it can fit in either or. It definitely has a bit of a floating potential to work in either structure.
Okay, Councillor Carr, and then.
I do have a concern with, I think it was in Sam Mugford's report there about our population diminishing every year. And I do have a concern about hiring more positions rather than restructuring what we have based on that. I have a concern with that.
That's fair.
Counselor Ford,
So the typo error then is under option one, financial implications, where it should be reading 15 to 20, not 20 to 40.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
So it, under the budgetary impacts of 5.5A, that gives you the much more detailed, accurate.
So
increase.
those numbers in budgetary impacts do not change, even though the financial implication changes.
And the budgetary impacts is the actual.
Okay. Because the only concern that I have is going back to Director Mumford's report, that change, that's why I asked the question when it came to the increase, because that increase was about 69,000, which I understand this is a part of, but I'm a little bit hesitant when it comes to the proposal that a new FTE will be the park lead, and that's coming later. So where does that, if that's passed at a later date, and I don't know what the decision on this is gonna be now, how does that, being that new position that we want to create is not part of this budget, and it would be an increase to the budget, where does that change that 3% number?
It's in the budget currently.
The new FTE is in the
Correct.
budget.
That is correct, yes. There was a cost savings of a reduction for a position that will no longer be available in 2024 budget. So that's how we're offsetting some of that increase.
Counselor.
Is there a way, and this is just me thinking out loud, is there a way that we can table this decision until the FTE comes forward, so we can tie the two together at the same time, so we know what the actual numbers are gonna be?
Well,
You kind of know the numbers, do we not? Because the budget assumptions.
correct, included. So you saw in the community services change, the salary adjustment for the categories that Director Mumford put forward was 68,000.
Yeah.
So that 68,000 incorporates one FTE for the parks lead and the increase to the manager position.
Okay, so let's just assume then, let's just say that this doesn't pass, where does that, if the FTE and the manager position, let's say council decides not to go that way, where does that 3% number go then?
I don't.
Again, it's, you could either, arguably, you could contribute more to reserves, or you could adjust the percentage tax increase.
CAO Miller and then Counselor Good, Counselor Shannon.
Thank you, Michelle. I would like to express the importance of separating these two positions. Because as important as the parks lead is, we could do without that position, but it's really important that we elevate this position to get less direct reports on the director, so the director can spend more time on strategic and big thinking and project versus being in the inner workings of the pool and who's working what shift and should never be working at that level. So, and the fact that that position is becoming vacant and we do need to do attraction and retention on that position, it's important that we get it right. And it is timely because that is a key position. And as soon as that position becomes vacant, that's just that much more work on the director. So it's important that we get that position advertised and try to get it filled as soon as possible. So it's getting clouded with that other park position, and that's a whole different discussion. Again, right now, the critical component is reducing the number of direct reports and operational day-to-day work that the director is doing and move that over to a different position so the director can be doing the work of the director.
which includes, I understand, applying for grants and doing that kind of thing, which, think about it, council, we had a lot of work on that aspect added on. Okay, who is next? Councillor Good, and then Shannon, Councillor Shannon, Councillor Carr.
I have a higher comfort level of parks being separate from public works, not in any critical way of either section. It's just that parks to me, would baseball diamonds be included in parks?
Correct.
Okay, to my mind, that's recreation. Would the jungle gyms and the climbing equipment at the parks be recreation? To my mind, that's not public works. That's recreation, and parks, to my mind, are inherently linked to recreation more than a roadway and more than just a flat chunk of grass. If all of our parks were nothing but flat chunks of grass, I could probably see it. You just mow the grass, but they're not. They're integrated with other parts of our recreation world. And while I understand and to a degree, agree with having to take into account the population loss. One of the things that I know that we've dealt with and had discussed with us is that retaining good people in the town of Peace River and trying to mitigate against loss of population is having services that are attractive and beneficial for people coming in. When we talk about doctor retention, to my mind, and physician retention, you say, well, we're going to do that, but the parks are going to now be under public works, so they're not going to have the same amount of professional attention to the gym infrastructure, the recreation infrastructure, because they wouldn't. Those specialists aren't there. I think that it's better to have that under recreation. I think you're going to have an easier job of retaining really good people into the town of Peace River. I can see the point of separating them, but to me, like I say, parks have always been part of recreation more so than just chunks of grass. But that's my own feeling.
Thank you. Councillor Shannon, then Councillor Carr.
So I guess my concern is it was the same as Mr. Carr. We lost 1.63 people. So, but then I don't know if it's just me being optimistic, but I have a feeling we'll be getting more people. So I can understand this 15 to 20,000 being reasonable for what you're trying to do there. I do see that now, but I do want to see the parks lead be separate out of that, not in the same way. But so what you're saying that it's basically a restructuring of responsibilities with a minimal increase.
Right.
And this will make things move smoother, and that would this give you more capacity when the population does rise then?
Yes.
Would that be fair to?
Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carr?
No, I think I had the best.
Okay. Okay, so the any further, Councillor Boychuk?
All right, I'm gonna throw a screw into this. I Googled this position, and out of 143 jobs, I haven't seen anybody get more than 33 bucks an hour, and we're looking at paying somebody over 50 bucks an hour. But it pretty well lists the same duties. So I'm just wondering what am I missing there when I Google that position? Because
I don't know, because I don't know what you're doing, Googling, and when we do our analysis, and we do have information that was done with the organizational review, we have salary comparisons.
Yeah. So that was part of the organizational review, is also to do a salary report.
Correct.
So Mr. Google might not be totally comparing Peace River to,
oh, it's comparing all across Canada, right?
Yeah.
You know,
so,
but
yeah.
it looks like it has the same duties. That's why I'm wondering what I'm missing.
I don't know, it's hard for me to answer that question without actually having my job description, that what you're looking at.
I literally Googled the exact position that you're doing, and then found two sites. One
If
is
you go
Glass-
to the Recreation Facility Personnel of Alberta, or the Alberta Recreation Parks Association, those are our provincial associations that we align with and utilize for reference.
So, I think we're getting a little too much into the details here. It's, whether or not, we are agreeing with the change in classification of the recreation facilities coordinator position to a manager at Rec and Parks position. That is what we should be dealing with. Any further comments, discussion? Anybody willing to put forth any motions? Sounds are good.
I'll move the council approve the change of classification of the recreational facilities coordinator position to a manager of recreation and parks.
All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? It is carried. You're in favor? It is carried. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Director Bell. Lots of work on that one too. Next up, we have CAO Miller with the Peace Regional Waste Management Company request to pre-register as a participating EPR facility.
Thank you, Your Worship. I may need a little bit of help from the council appointees, but essentially the Peace Regional Waste Management Company is seeking authorization from the town to pre-register on our behalf in ARMA's Extended Producer Responsibility Recycling Program. And to do so, the registration is open, I believe, now until the end of December. And it does require a motion of council for the board to proceed with that. And if council reps would like to add to that, because I know very little on this subject.
So as I understand it, there's new EPR regulations that are coming into effect. Some will come into effect on January 1 of 2025, and municipalities have to be prepared. Supposedly, this Alberta provincial regulation causes those who manufacture some of the recycling project or items to then become responsible for their recycling aspect of them, rather than the municipalities becoming responsible for the whole kit and caboodle. Anything else to add, Councillor Carr, Councillor Shannon?
This is just to, so intend to register when the time comes. You don't have to complete that. This is just intent.
So you do get the waste management company. My impression is they're registering on behalf of one of their partners. Well, all three partners are being asked in the waste management company if they want the waste management company to register and look after some of the details, some of the ongoing knowledge processes of this EPR plan. Councillor Carr, is that kind of
That sounds about right, yeah.
sort of reasonable?
It's essentially passing the costs off less on the.
Yeah. And getting the waste management to kind of liaison some of the details. So it, as Councillor Carr says, kind of puts it off onto the waste management company to keep track of things and report back to the municipalities through the reps and through the company itself, I would say. So, any discussion? Someone care?
So
Yeah, sorry.
this is kind of an administrative favor we
Yes.
can take care of for the Peace Regional Management Company, so you could carry on doing
So
that
that-
important work that you do.
So that the town does not then have to do some of this stuff itself.
Okay, perfect. I will move the council authorize Peace Regional Waste Management Company to register the EPR program on behalf of the town.
Thank you for the motion. Any further discussion, questions? All those in favor? It is carried. I should also mention that the Waste Management Company has arranged for ARMA, which is another recycling organization, to hold a seminar of some sort, and I understand it's coming up rather quickly, the 25th, or no, 21st. So next Tuesday in the afternoon at St. Isidore. So information should be forthcoming on that, and information, put it that way. So next item is, well, this is a good one. The December 7th Council Christmas Open House. CAO Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this briefing is just a reminder, as per the organizational meeting and the calendar that was adopted by council. Thursday, December 7th is the day you all are hosting your Christmas open house. It's going to be held again at the Baytex Energy Center from 4:30 to 6:30. Administration will have some information boards. In particular, we'll be putting budget out there for the public to view and have comment on, the public spaces, the camping bylaw. And we're gonna try to highlight some of our accomplishments this year. And if there's anything in particular council would like us to have displayed or brought forward for discussion, if you can let us know. Please, thank you.
And I think the Waste Management Company has asked if the Eco Center could present, well, have information available there, perhaps with the staff member. Okay, any further questions on that? So it's 4:30 to 6:30, December 7th. Okay, would someone be prepared to move the council accept the briefing note regarding the December 7th, 2023 council Christmas open house for information? Councillor Shannon so moves. All those in favor? It is carried. Last up, and then we're gonna have a little break. So this one is CAO annual review, CAO Miller.
Thank you again, Your Worship. So this is just to, again, provide a bit of a briefing to let council know that I haven't forgotten the process. I'm still in discussions. I have selected a firm I'd like to work with. I'm just seeking some references. They have provided some references to me, but the references they provided weren't for this scope of work. And so I'm looking for a reference for this particular type of work. So I anticipate by the end of the week, I should have that finalized. And then the next council meeting, we will have a closed session and we'll discuss the process and the questions that you like to choose to be presented, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Any questions for the CAO? Would someone be prepared to move that the council accept the briefing note regarding the CAO annual review for information? Councillor Carr so moves. All those in favor? It is carried. Okay, we've got I find an interesting report coming up, but I think we need a break. So we'll break for 5 minutes to 7:41.
Yeah, I know. You're gonna get over that.
No, it's not. It's not.
front of us is municipal affairs, municipal indicator reports. Comparing Town of Peace River stats from 2021 to 2022. You've had a chance to review this, including a chart at the back, the last 2 pages. So, counselors, did you find anything surprising, interesting, or leave it open-ended there?
Well, I do see they recommended to do some more studies. That's a good time. Which, sorry?
Make sure you're reading that, because probably. Basically, the indicators, they're talking about expected result, what it means, and suggested follow-ups. So some of the follow-ups just kind of happen naturally, I think. But I'm paying particular attention to page 93 and 94 of our package, which is the charts. They kind of outline where we are over these 2 years. And I think the results are pretty good. Maybe even some nice little surprises.
4 million on our accumulated surplus.
Yes, 2021 accumulated surplus was 4.1 million. Apparently the province is happy as long as it's greater than 0. In 2022, it says 8.4 million. So that seems to be a good thing. We got our financial reports in on time in 2022. Councillor Shannon, anything you'd like to comment?
I found it interesting that the interest in municipal office went down from 3.29 to 1.66. I found that very interesting.
Or what are you reading now?
Well, that's not the same.
No, that's not the same thing. I thought I saw that.
That can only happen during an election.
No, sorry. Yes.
So interest in municipal office, that was how many candidates and round for positions. We had a 3.29, and as long as it's greater than 1 or greater than 0, municipal affairs is happy. And here's I see your population change. That's where you're getting the negative 1.63%. Well, it was less than in 2021, where it was negative 1.85, I guess. How they manage to figure out populations when they don't really do census year to year, kind of the miracle. I don't know. Anything else? Yes.
What our debt to revenue percentage is 81.04. Is that a good percentage to have in there? Or what is your ideal?
Less than 120% according to municipal affairs.
Less than which?
120%.
Getting better.
It was 99.4 and it's now 81. So we must have paid off some debt or revenue went up. One of the 2 things. Yeah. Anyways, apparently we collect taxes pretty good. Investment in infrastructure. We're okay there. Infrastructure age, interesting. 2021, we were 6.02, however that means, and 55.14 infrastructure age. They're happy as long as it's over 40%. So anyways, general public out there and anybody that likes stats and comparisons, I thought this was kind of just interesting. And there's another regional dashboard you can do that you can combine communities to compare various elements. And that was the one that I used at our G4. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. Okay, anything further on that one? Okay, then we come on to council event attendance reports. And we've got a whole whack of them here, including mine, Councillor Boychuk's, Councillor Ford's, Councillor Scamahorn, Councillor Shannon was last meeting, I believe. So, any questions on any of these? Come in, Councillor Ford.
Yeah, just to get some clarity, so I'm understanding the and how to fill the reports out properly. So my understanding at the organizational meeting, when Ms. Parsons explained it, so the timesheet is for your committees, your meetings, GP meetings, council meetings, etc. Your per diem is for your, could be for your training, but mainly for your attending conferences, etc. And your attendance report was not supposed to be specific to those events that you're attending that do not go on your timesheet. For instance, November 11th, the fire department open house. So I'm just curious as, am I supposed to be putting my council meetings on that report or not? Because just to get consistency out of everybody, that's all.
Okay, Councilor Shannon?
I'm to the understanding, I mean, that was the whole idea why we stopped putting down things that we didn't want to charge for, was because we were going to put them, the only thing that should be on this report are things that you went to that you were not paid for or that you were not claiming. That was that is the understanding. Why else would we be putting everything on there? That's on our other report. So that's what this report is. That's what I agreed to anyway, is putting only, this report should be for the stuff that you are not paying for, you are not paid for, you are not claiming for. It should be just those things, community events that you went to that are included under your salary. That's how I intend to, and I think we all should be. Wasn't that one of the reasons to do this, was to have consistency?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I'm not disagreeing with you. Well, I shouldn't speak. I didn't answer.
Councilor Good.
Right, yeah. I think, well, let's put it this way. I think it makes sense to do it the way you're speaking. I think it makes sense and I think it gives clarity personally. If you're, for example, if I go to an NPC meeting and I'll be honest with you, I'm terrible at filling out reports. I've said that to people already, so I'm gotta get caught up on that. But if I go to an NPC meeting, I'm getting paid for that to some degree. Put it on my, what I get paid for.
Yeah.
If I go to, I don't know, Billabong Nature Emporium to talk to somebody about it, I want to put that down, I can put it on the other sheet. I don't see any problem with that. I think to my feeling was that the putting it down on an expense report doesn't really explain to people what it does, and some people will put more down on their activity report. But if you just put down what you're doing, I think it makes sense to do what you're saying, keep them separate, hey, stuff over here, other stuff over here. I don't have a problem with that. To me, it's just easier. I don't have to think about which one's going to get paid to put it here. The forms and me don't get along really well at all.
Okay, any other?
I think one of the advantages of doing it where we're describing what's going on is that like, so in the first month that I did this for September, we had attended the conference, so it also gave an opportunity, which we were paid. So it also gave an opportunity to write down, okay, well, this is what, came out of the conference as well. So yeah, so when I looked at it, well, yeah, I mean, of the ones that had come out, attending the conference was on the AM conference was on most of the reports that came in from September. So fair enough. And then the other advantage is including some of what's been going on at the things that we are attending. So yeah, so I had the MPC online, but that doesn't need to go on there. Fair enough. So being able to kind of comment a little bit about what was, sort of done and some of these other things is, I think, fair enough for people to see. It's more information.
Wait, Councilor Shannon? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There's a place and time for that, though. I mean, you're doing that when you speak through your reports and minutes come through here all the time. the whole idea that stemmed from making this report was to put things that you don't get paid for, that are community events, so that we know what we're doing. The people already know, we don't have to explain that to them from the other things, because they're gonna read the minutes, they're going to know that we went to those. These are the things that that we don't get paid for. That's the what we have agreed upon, and to my understanding, there was not to be, but to make more work and make another report and list everything on there again. It's redundant, and I noticed the difference, because then I noticed, okay, we're supposed to put our conferences on, but no, I don't agree with that. I think that report should be strictly for those things that we had agreed upon in the beginning.
Okay, and Ms. Parsons?
So I was just going to, reference the policy just for clarification. So 2.5 talks about, submitting the written report, exactly, what Deputy Mayor Shannon is referring to, which is a written report to administration outlining their, representative attendance and activities in their official capacity for the month to be placed on the governance and priorities agenda for information and subsequently posted online, along with any per diem hourly rate and expense claims. So that would be the stuff that you attended in your official capacity, which were not part of your hourly rate claims. So like for your already attended committees or GMP council meetings, but there's also a section under 6.2B, which is claims. And that's expenses incurred by a member of council and per diems requested by a member of council in relation to events, conferences, conventions, and courses are funded through the councilor's individual discretionary professional development budget and are only eligible for reimbursement or payments once a report to council has been submitted. So I think the intention was also to give like a little brief note on those reports, just about, you know, if you attended a conference, convention, or some sort of training, you know, what it was the purpose of its attendance, or like maybe something you learned, I don't know. For example, like we did when, or like council did when they attended the AM conference, just a little note about maybe the sessions that they attended. But otherwise, yes, it wouldn't be for any of your, you know, NPC or those assigned committees, or, you know, attending the council meeting.
So it's a combination of both then,
I would
both
say
things that have been brought up here.
the per diems probably, and the things attended in official capacity, but not the hourly rate claim stuff on that claim form. Exactly.
Okay, so if you go to a conference or if you go to professional development, then that means it should be on this as well as attending the opening of something. Right?
So does your conference go on the event report as well as the per diem, or can you put that?
Because the per diem is where you claim the number.
Yeah.
And this is where you report the.
Yeah.
Okay,
According to the policy, you shouldn't get paid for your conference if you haven't submitted a
Okay.
report on it.
okay, no, just for
Which
clarity.
leads to another question about awkward timing, but maybe we can just let that pass. Okay, so in future, as we said, and as we found out here, we'll have the per diem reports will be in here. The per diem will also be another page that you have your expenses on for per diem. And anything that you do in the community as a town person goes on these reports. Is that clarified? Councilor Shannon?
I just have one more question. I noticed, and that's to do with professional development. So I noticed, Councillor Scamahorn has on his professional development being Toastmasters. So is that, so
According to the policy,
you can
professional development, that was actually
That
one
would
of
be
the examples given.
membership fees
I don't know.
and stuff like that.
That's a quarterly claim.
Hmm?
Professional development is a quarterly claim, isn't it, for training?
No.
No, it should be.
As you incur it.
Oh, okay.
I just want to clarify what that entailed, that's
Yeah.
all.
So if I would not put on this attendance report that, I don't know, I can't think of what do I pay for that? It's different. What's something else besides Toastmasters that would go there?
What about the,
Sorry?
Whatever those trainings we do when we go to a conference.
Yeah. Yeah, you would report on them, I guess.
That's training.
Yeah.
Gym
Would be
membership.
Gym membership, no. Although maybe we should all be there doing it. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
That's a health spending.
Guys,
I wouldn't put down, I'm Legion. I wouldn't put down that I went to Legion. Because I'm not.
Because it's not
I'm not
the
doing
town.
this- Sorry, I'm not doing that as a counselor, I'm not doing that as a town now. I might have conversations with people there, because people come up here all over the place, so, but I wouldn't put it on to a report, like a council report, because that's not my main function of going there.
Yeah.
So my determining thing would be, am I doing this? One of the lines that Lord Mann used to use was the but for clause. Would I be there but for being a counselor? If the answer is yes, I'm there because I'm a counselor, then I would put it somewhere. If I'm there not because I'm a counselor, no. That's just the way I would look at it. To me, that simplifies it.
Counselor Shannon.
Sorry to go back to the yours, but that's just the easy as example. Okay, so you're gonna, for professional development, Toastmasters, you go, you pay your $150 or whatever for a year. Are you also claiming those hours that you're at Toastmasters? There's a question.
yeah, so I figured the rate, because the meetings are 2 hours long, that's not half a day even, so. The rate that I felt was fair according to the policy would have been like 1/2 day per 2 meetings. So that's what I rung up on the last month's claim. It's kind of hard because you claim 1 meeting for half a day, and the next meeting you don't claim at all, but the numbers kind of will work in the end.
I have gone several times to 1 hour's virtual seminars. They don't necessarily cost, but I've gone there because I'm on a town council and it's resulting from some committee, topic. So that kind of thing for sure. So I would claim those somehow rather than per diem thing, add them up over time.
Yeah.
Which takes a while, but. So I get it. Does that answer your?
Well, and the other, sorry.
Yeah.
So the other side of it is what else could you have done that day? So yes, it was
Yeah.
1 hour, but it's like,
Yeah.
well, it speaks for
my
like
day.
my whole day. So just because you're only there for 1 hour, doesn't mean that's like, okay, so it means I gotta attend 4 of these to make a half day. It's like, well, I don't know that that's reasonable either.
Keeping track of it all is kind of interesting.
Very. Well, and the other side to it, though, and I guess maybe this comes out of my regular day job, is that as a professional, teachers, yes, you can laugh at me if you want, but we do consider ourselves professionals. So hopefully nobody, but you are managers of your own time. No one comes and tells me like, okay, you're gonna work on your report cards this evening. It's like, I manage that time. So we also in capacities counselors need to make sure that we are acting in a manner that we could consistently label as professional. So we are managing our own time and navigating through this situation, whatever, and doing it in a professional manner. So.
And the public can judge.
Absolutely.
And I hate to go there, but if I was in a private company, I would suggest that most of their professional development is paid time. Kind of thing. A lot of it would be. Yeah, but anyways, does this satisfy the questions, councilors?
A lot more clarity.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're in the beginning part of this process, so we're getting there. Yeah. Okay.
Check in, so we're all, like you say, we are all, and honestly, for the first month where we've all got this in, they were pretty close.
Yeah. Okay, so would someone be putting forth a motion that council accept reports 9-1 through 9-2 for information? Councilor Good would do that?
Yes, I'll move the council accept reports 9-1 to 9-2 for information.
Thank you. All those in favor? It is carried. Okay, now we're on to information items, the first of which was the November 3rd council communication package. Looking through that, specifically, if there's any invitation that somebody wants to talk about, they should bring it up. We do have November 8th. I understand somebody attended Aboriginal Veterans Day, and I attended the November 11th Remembrance Day. I don't know if anybody was able to attend number 2 there. North Peace Society for Prevention of Domestic Violence and Stepping Up. They had an open house.
I did make it to the open house.
Great. And I understand Restorative Justice is also sharing space.
It was a very good tour, yeah.
Great.
They've got that building set up very well.
And we have Light Up the Park happening on November 24th. Usually around 7 p.m. or so it starts. Anything else people want to bring up about the information items? Yes.
Reminder, Santa Claus parade on the 25th, starting at 5 o'clock. And I did get a comment from one of the members at the RCMP CAC committee about the letter of support that the town of Peace River sent in, and they said it was very, very well written.
Thank you. I lost my train of thought here. Okay, would we also have the governance and priorities minutes of November 6th for information? And therefore, would somebody be prepared to put forth a motion accepting for information items 10.1 and 10.2?
Sure.
Councillor Ford so moves. All those in favor? It is carried. Notice of motion. Do we have any?
I'm not.
Great. Comments from the public? Maybe not. Key communication items. So we've got the Light Up the Park on the 24th, the 25th Santa Claus Parade. What else do we have that people would like to bring forth? December 7th open house. Might have some comments about the budget that have been presented thus far. Anything else? Okay. And now maybe we'll take a 2-minute break, get organized, and come back into closed session with a motion of some sort. I don't know which staff are needed for closed.
I think that's on that. Oh, yes. Yeah, you're gonna speak to Neston.